The world of El Chapo was a labyrinth of power, betrayal, and tragedy. Zulma Julia Hernandez, one of his many lovers, paid the ultimate price for her association with the notorious drug lord. Found dead in the trunk of a car, her brutal murder hinted at a sinister plot. But what drove her into the arms of such a dangerous man? And what secrets lay hidden behind her tragic fate? The murder. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Mexico's notorious drug lord, has a reputation for being a serial womanizer. But being romantically linked to the world's most infamous criminal comes with a hefty price tag. Just ask Zulma Julia Hernandez, one of El Chapo's many lovers, who paid the ultimate price for her association with the kingpin. On December 17, 2008, Zulma's lifeless body was discovered in the trunk of a car, bearing the gruesome signs of torture. The autopsy revealed that she had endured unimaginable suffering before her death. The chilling footprints at the crime scene and the letter Z etched into her skin hinted at a sinister plot. The Zetas cartel, a rival gang vying for territory with El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel, was suspected of orchestrating her brutal murder. But was it really a case of cartel rivalry? Or was there more to Zulma's tragic fate? To truly grasp Zulma's tragic end, we must rewind the clock, back to the events that set her on this path of darkness. It all began with a robbery. From robbery to infamy. The date was April 1997. The Mexican sun beat down on Tepido, a bustling marketplace known for its labyrinthine alleys and energetic vendors. Juan Gabriel Stubitores, a young man with his whole life ahead of him, was just trying to make a living. He had finished selling clothes to a stall owner and was heading back to his car, parked discreetly nearby. Suddenly, his world turned upside down. Zulma appeared beside him, a glint of steel flashing in her hand. It was a gun, and her voice was cold as she barked orders, forcing Juan Gabriel into the passenger seat. This was the beginning of the robbery that would see Zulma land in trouble. Moments later, two other figures materialized from the shadows, their faces obscured. The mood was thick with menace, as they demanded Juan's car keys and money. Juan, stunned and terrified, stammered a response, but it was clear they weren't interested in negotiation. Soon, a chilling conversation arose. Juan Gabriel's appearance, his clothes perhaps hinting at a more affluent background, sparked a new, horrifying idea. They would kidnap him. Following this, blows rained down on Juan Gabriel. He flinched from punches, his pleas for mercy swallowed by the roar of the engine. One of the accomplices contorted his body, folding down the back seats. Without warning, they shoved Juan Gabriel into the darkness of the trunk. Zulma, now behind the wheel, started the car. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A routine police patrol suddenly appeared, and two uniformed policemen were running on foot a few meters in their direction. In the moment that followed, Zulma's associate jumped out and fled. Zulma herself panicked and put the car in reverse. This was Juan Gabriel's chance. With a surge of adrenaline, he fought his way out of the trunk and a struggle ensued between him and Zulma. The police descended upon the scene, and Zulma was apprehended. Her accomplices had vanished during the commotion. At the station, a shaken Juan Gabriel identified her in a lineup. Zulma's story, however, was far from over. She claimed a kidnapping was never part of the plan. She insisted her accomplices were the masterminds, that she was just a pawn in their twisted game. But her claims of innocence were met with deaf ears. The brutality she endured in police custody added a horrifying new layer to the story. She described being stripped naked and paraded in front of officers who leered and took photographs, blindfolded with toilet paper, her head muffled with tape. She spoke of being slapped and groped in the darkness. Her pleas for help from human rights workers were ignored, her cries swallowed by the silence of the interrogation room. Zulma's accusations of police brutality cast a long shadow over the case. However, in the courtroom, the judge remained unmoved. He dismissed her claims and sentenced her to 10 years in prison for robbery. Little did anyone know, including Zulma herself, that within the walls of the prison, a connection would be forged. A connection that would bind her fate to the most notorious drug lord the world had ever seen. Beauty, brains, and the battle for control. Zulma began her prison sentence at the Reclusorio Oriente. Her arrival there in late April 1997 was like a splash of cold water on the prison's scorching social scene. News of this newcomer, a woman whose beauty was as legendary as the crime that landed her there, spread like wildfire. Back then, Santa Marta Acatitla, a notorious women's prison, hadn't been built yet. Instead, processed and sentenced, Women found themselves housed in female modules within prisons that also held male inmates. Zulema's name held no weight yet, but the detailed descriptions accompanying her file painted a vivid picture. At 5 feet 6 inches and weighing just over 60 kilos, she wasn't particularly imposing. Her thick, dark brown hair cascaded down her back, framing light brown skin that could almost be described as white. Her face held a hint of defiance, with a strong oval chin and large, dark brown eyes that seemed to hold a permanent glint of mischief. A generous mouth, often described as perpetually curved into a smile, hinted at a charisma that would later prove both captivating and dangerous. Adding to the intrigue, discrepancies arose regarding her birth date. Documents listed December 3rd and December 10th, 1977, leaving the exact date a mystery. The physical descriptions were just the beginning. Medical records documented a map of scars etched onto her body. 2 were on her forehead, another pair circled her right wrist, and more were scattered across her left arm. There was an old bite mark on her right forearm, while a curious cross-shaped mark adorned her neck, and on her right thigh was a unicorn. More tattoos, a bat, and the single bold letter Z completed the canvas of her back and right hand respectively. Zulema wasn't just captivating physically, her intelligence also drew attention. Psychologists and criminologists noted an intellectual capacity above average. They saw a cunning manipulator, a woman who wielded her intellect and charisma like weapons, and their observations proved tragically accurate. Zulema, it turned out, was a natural leader. In no time, she had taken control of the drug trade within Reclusorio Oriente. Security guards, susceptible to her undeniable beauty, found themselves helplessly drawn into her orbit, only to be discarded at her whim. She ruled the women's sector with an iron fist, a queen in a concrete jungle, with little regard for the established authority. With time, the officials at Reclusorio Oriente became overwhelmed by Zulema's defiance and grew desperate for a solution. They couldn't handle her. Her influence was a ticking time bomb. So, with a sigh of relief, they transferred her to a new prison called Reclusorio Norte. Ironically, this new destination was just a few blocks away from a childhood home where, according to Zulema's sessions with the psychologists, she had endured a troubled past. These evaluations, along with the various tests administered during her incarceration, began to piece together fragments of Zulema's life story. The woman behind the captivating facade was slowly coming into focus. Zulema's turbulent family history. Zulema's story began in the shadow of absence. She was the eldest of 2 children, each born to a different father. Whether Zulema ever knew her biological father remained a mystery, but one thing was clear: he was a ghost, absent throughout her life. A prison official painted a bleak picture of Zulema's upbringing, describing her primary family nucleus as incomplete, broken, and chaotic. The bond between mother and daughter seemed strained, marked by rejection, aggression, and a complete breakdown in communication. Zulema's mother, Salome Hernandez Ramirez, appeared to struggle with her own demons. A heavy reliance on alcohol, marijuana, and even prostitution painted a disturbing picture of her lifestyle. Zulema's account added another layer of pain to the story. She claimed her own mother harbored a deep-seated hatred towards her, simply for being another woman in a life already fraught with difficulties. Unable to endure this toxic environment any longer, Zulema fled at the tender age of 8. She found refuge with a kind aunt. However, life offered little respite. By the age of 16, Zulema fell into a relationship with a man significantly older than her. The details surrounding this relationship remain unknown, but it hints at a young girl searching for stability in all the wrong places. Zulema's education was also marked by disruption. Though she eventually completed middle school at an older age, her high school dreams were cut short. The reports mention her starting high school, but then abruptly leaving during the first year. The reason for this remains shrouded in secrecy, another piece missing from the puzzle of her past. Despite this setback, Zulma clung to a semblance of normalcy. She herself spoke of holding down a job as a secretary, and even pursuing additional studies in a vocational field. These glimpses into her life, before her arrival at Reclusorio Norte, paint a portrait of a young woman trying to navigate a world that had dealt her a difficult hand. Now, with this background in mind, we can continue to delve into her experiences within the prison walls. Escape attempts, loss, and transfer. Zulma's time at Reclusorio Norte was far from peaceful. The harsh realities of prison life clashed with any desires for freedom she may have harbored. So, on September 12, 1997, when a riot erupted within the prison, Zulma saw her chance to escape. The scene that day was one of pure pandemonium. Alarmed guards, wearing protective gear, ushered inmates out of their cells, fearing a mass escape. Amidst the chaos, Zulma hatched a daring plan. She gathered together a group of fellow inmates and unveiled her plan. She would dash for freedom through the prison fences, no matter the cost. Armed with nothing more than a rope, Zulma prepared herself for the perilous attempt. Some inmates, wide-eyed with fear, tried to dissuade her, but Zulma was resolute. With a final farewell, she began climbing the prison fence. The rough surface of the fence scraped against her skin, but she pressed on, fueled by the dream of a life beyond bars. Just as Zulma neared the bottom on the other side, the crack of gunfire shattered the air. The suddenness of it all caused her to fall and injure her legs. Despite the pain, she pushed on. However, guards soon descended upon her before she could make a clean escape. They grabbed her roughly and subjected her to a brutal beating. As if that wasn't enough, they stripped her naked and threw her into solitary confinement, a place designed to break even the strongest spirit. The solitary confinement cell was a nightmare come to life. It was a cramped 2x2-meter space that had no mattress and no light, but only the chilling presence of cockroaches and rats scuttling across the floor. Days turned into nights, and Zulma lost all sense of time. This solitary confinement wasn't the only ordeal Zulma would face within these walls. Shortly after her failed escape, she suffered a devastating miscarriage. The emotional strain of this loss, coupled with the limitations of prison life, drove her to take drastic measures. She attempted to take her own life by ingesting all the medication she had available. The circumstances surrounding the pregnancy itself were veiled in secrecy. Reports indicate that the father of the unborn child was a prison official. This detail adds another layer of complexity to Zulma's story. It hints at a potential relationship, a flicker of connection within the confines of the prison walls. Zulma's actions did not go unnoticed. The Mexico City government, alarmed by her escape attempt and suicide attempt, decided to take action. They felt Reclusorio Norte wasn't equipped to handle Zulma and requested her transfer to a higher security facility. Their request was granted by the federal government on January 31st, 2000. Zulma was transferred to the Federal Center for Social Readaptation No. 2 in Puente Grande, Jalisco. Zulma's arrival at Puente Grande would unknowingly place her on a collision course with El Chapo, forever altering the trajectory of her life.
El Chapo's rise to power behind bars. While Zulma was still within the harsh walls of Reclusorio Norte, another drama had been brewing southwards in Puente Grande Federal Prison. The year was 1993, and El Chapo had just been captured in Guatemala. He wasn't exactly a model citizen, facing a laundry list of charges including drug trafficking, murder, and kidnapping. His name was whispered with fear and respect, a notorious figure in the ruthless world of Mexican drug cartels. El Chapo's reputation even stretched beyond the criminal underworld. He was linked to the shocking assassination of Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, a high-ranking religious figure shot 14 times at the Guadalajara airport. Rumors suggested the cardinal might have possessed sensitive information, perhaps details about the Mexican government's secret dealings with the very drug cartels they were supposed to be fighting. Despite these serious charges, El Chapo found himself sentenced to 20 years at Puente Grande. On paper, it seemed like a fitting punishment. Little did anyone know, this supposedly high-security prison would become a stage for a bizarre and disturbing display of power. El Chapo, it turned out, was a man who thrived on chaos. Even behind bars, his influence grew like a weed. He weaved a web of corruption, slowly pulling prison employees into his orbit. Guards, wardens, whoever held the key to a little extra comfort or privilege, El Chapo had them wrapped around his finger. These compromised officials became his willing pawns, smuggling in liquor and exotic food for lavish prison parties. They even facilitated the transfer of the few female inmates at Puente Grande, making them available to serve the whims of the capos, El Chapo included. The extent of his control was almost unbelievable. One Christmas, he orchestrated a mind-boggling feat, a family vacation within the prison walls. For an entire week, his family transformed Puente Grande into their own personal resort. While the family vacation was a show-stopping event, it wasn't El Chapo's only indulgence during his time at Puente Grande. Among the female prisoners, Zulma Hernandez caught his eye. Perhaps drawn by her story, her spirit, or simply a flicker of human connection in a world devoid of it, El Chapo singled her out among the female prisoners. Zulma, with her own troubled past and yearning for something more, soon became the favorite of El Chapo. This set the stage for a complex and unlikely relationship within the confines of a corrupted prison. A twisted love story. El Chapo and Zulema's relationship blossomed, taking on a life of its own. The drug lord became utterly captivated by Zulema, and his obsession spilled over into his letters, filled with passionate declarations and a possessive undercurrent. "Although I'm staying a few days more," he wrote in one, "I am moved by your transfer. Precious one, if before your transfer we could see each other, I want to give you a sweet kiss and hold you in my arms." These weren't just empty words. They hinted at a deeper plan brewing in El Chapo's mind. His mention of staying a few days wasn't a metaphor. It was a veiled boast about his impending escape, a detail he couldn't resist flaunting to the woman who consumed his thoughts. There was another crucial detail that later surfaced. You see, Zulema had a son named Brandon. The identity of the boy's father remained a mystery, shrouded in the shadows of her past. Authorities, lacking a clear picture, mistakenly assumed Brandon was another of El Chapo's children. While this turned out to be false, it foreshadowed a darker chapter in Zulema's story. Although El Chapo's initial infatuation with Zulema appeared genuine, it was ultimately a love poisoned by his ruthless nature. As with many of his relationships, his obsession eventually turned into boredom. Zulema, once the object of his affection, became merely a pawn in his twisted game. Authorities suspected, and later confirmed, that El Chapo passed her around to his friends in the prison. This betrayal left Zulema utterly broken. The woman who had sought solace in a relationship now found herself subjected to unimaginable horrors. She was reportedly left traumatized, having lost her mind under the relentless pressure. El Chapo and his associates inflicted horrific abuse upon her, forcing Zulema to undergo not one, but 2 abortions while she was imprisoned. One of these procedures nearly cost her life, leaving her physically and emotionally scarred. A controversial release. Zulema's time within the twisted confines of Puente Grande was nearing its end. Officially, her departure unfolded in May 2001, just a few months after El Chapo's audacious escape. This timing sparked a flurry of speculation and raised questions about the true motives behind her transfer. The catalyst for Zulema's move came from an unexpected source: her own mother, Salome Hernandez Ramirez. Dissatisfied with her daughter's transfer to a prison originally designed for men, Salome filed a complaint with the National Human Rights Commission. This wasn't an isolated incident. Several protests erupted, echoing Salome's concerns and demanding the transfer of all female inmates from these unsuitable facilities. The outcry reached the ears of former President Vicente Fox, who intervened. He ordered the relocation of female inmates, including Zulema, to medium security centers. Tepepan became her new destination. One academic, who had interviewed Zulema years prior, caught a glimpse of her upon arrival. The sight was a stark contrast to his previous memory. She looked older, and her face was marred by scars. Zulema's stay at Tepepan was short-lived. By mid-2003, she was released. The official explanation was straightforward. She had been granted early parole. Zulema herself echoed this claim. However, whispers of a different story began to go around. It was circulated amongst those determined to bring El Chapo to justice. Their theory painted a picture of manipulation and desperation. They believed El Chapo, unable to bear the emotional withdrawal of Zulema's absence, couldn't function. According to them, his associates orchestrated Zulema's early release, hoping her presence would lure him out of hiding and back into the clutches of the authorities. Whether this theory held any truth remained shrouded in speculation. One thing was certain, however: Zulema's release marked a turning point in her story. She was free, but the scars of her past, both physical and emotional, would forever be a part of her. But what awaited her beyond the prison walls? Caught in the crossfire. On January 28, 2004, a few months after Zulema's release from prison, Mexican police received an anonymous tip about a large cocaine shipment from Colombia arriving at a warehouse in Azcapotzalco, Mexico City. The tip led them to seize over 2 tons of cocaine and arrest several people, including Pablo Rojas Lopez, El Halcon, a major drug trafficker in Mexico City. El Halcon revealed that the cocaine belonged to the Beltran Leyva brothers, who were part of a larger drug trafficking organization led by El Chapo. He also said that the cocaine was destined for Ricardo Temes, El Ricci, a lieutenant for Arturo Beltran Leyva in Monterrey. The arrest of El Halcon was significant because it provided a link between the Beltran Leyva brothers and Los Melizos, a Colombian drug trafficking group. Los Melizos were allegedly linked to the United Self-Defenders, a right-wing paramilitary group in Colombia. El Halcon also said that Los Melizos cocaine entered Mexico via Panama with the help of corrupt Mexican authorities. Part of the shipment was sent to Houston, Texas, while the rest was sold in Mexico City. One of the people arrested with El Halcon was Guillermo González Blasi, a friend of none other than Zulma Hernandez Ramirez. When the news of the arrest reached Zulema's ears, it sparked a chain of events that would shatter the fragile veneer of her newfound freedom. As per the accounts of Genaro Garcia Luna's police force, Zulma stormed into a public ministry agency, ready to demand justice for the arrest of her acquaintance. Little did she know, her act of defiance would land her in hot water, with the long arm of the law wrapping around her. She was also arrested, this time on suspicion of involvement in the drug trade. Despite vehemently denying any wrongdoing, the authorities hoped that her cell phones would lead them to El Chapo. The web of loyalty. Zulema's world had been turned upside down. One minute she was a free woman, the next she was under arrest, her phone confiscated, and her future uncertain. As investigators dug through the contents of her phone, a particular contact jumped out at them: Durango. There weren't many entries, just 2 numbers saved under that name, but for the trained eyes of the agents, it was a glaring clue. They knew with a chilling certainty that Durango was none other than Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the infamous drug lord. The inbound messages revealed a sense of urgency and longing from Durango, expressing concern for Zulema's safety and their relationship. Durango's messages oscillated between declarations of love and requests for communication. Highlighting his anxiety and desire to connect with Zulma, he expressed a mixture of affection and worry, urging Zulma to contact him and reassuring her of his support. Zulema's outgoing messages reflected her emotional turmoil and devotion to Durango. She responded with declarations of love, assurances of loyalty, and pleas for communication. Another glaring sign that El Chapo and Zulma were still connected came in the form of her legal representation. No matter which lieutenant of El Chapo's cartel faced prosecution, Zulema's lawyers appeared in every single case. It was a pattern too obvious to ignore, a silent vow of loyalty that spoke volumes about the unseen ties that bound Zulma to the elusive drug lord. During her trial after arrest, Zulma presented a carefully crafted persona. She portrayed herself as a legitimate businesswoman, earning a living through honest trade in Tepito market. The accusations of drug trafficking and cartel involvement were denied. Painted as a case of mistaken identity, Zulma's strategy went beyond mere denial. She actively contested the prosecution's case. She provided detailed accounts of alleged mistreatment by DEA agents during her arrest, highlighting potential coercion tactics used to extract a confession. Zulma revealed that she refused to cooperate, even when offered a potential reduction in charges in exchange for information on El Chapo's activities. The DEA's strategy of pressuring Zulma for information backfired spectacularly. Her refusal to cooperate thwarted their attempts to gather valuable intelligence. However, this victory came at a heavy price. Her defiance landed her back in prison, facing a barrage of serious charges which included organized crime, drug trafficking, money laundering. This time, though, the prison walls were different. Gone were the monstrous confines of the North or East prisons. Instead, she found herself within the newly opened Santa Martha Women's Prison. A different cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. Whether or not Zulma knew El Chapo's whereabouts remained a mystery. Despite the pressure, she never gave any clues that could lead the authorities to him. Opinions about Zulma within the prison walls were divided. Some inmates who knew her described a different Zulma, a woman who became a bully, a monster to them. Others, who never even crossed paths with her but were familiar with the drug trade, spoke of a Zulma's school, possibly referring to her own way of conducting business. Then, on a seemingly ordinary day, at 11:30 a.m. on May 31st, 2006, Zulema's life took another unexpected turn. She was notified of her acquittal. The judge had reviewed the case and found her not guilty of all charges. Zulma, a legacy forged in silence. Zulma used to say the worst thing was knowledge, but in the face of relentless persecution, she realized the even greater torment was the constant accusation and isolation. Everyone was certain she knew El Chapo's whereabouts, and their certainty turned into a prison of its own. Then, on December 17, 2008, a horrific discovery shattered the silence. A blue Volkswagen Bora sat abandoned in the neighborhood of Ecatepec, Mexico, the stench and buzzing flies a grim invitation. Inside the trunk, 2 bodies lay hidden under plastic bags. The male victim, a burly figure at 1.8 meters tall, was bound, gagged, and his head shrouded in darkness by a black plastic bag. The other victim was Zulema. Her head and feet shared the same grim fate as the man's, wrapped in plastic. Upon closer examination, a horrifying truth became evident. Another plastic bag, twisted and askew, remained partially wrapped around her neck. The evidence was clear. It had been used to suffocate her. Both victims shared a final brutal act. A single gunshot to the left temple, fired at a point when they were no longer breathing, as the forensics confirmed. The forensic investigation revealed further grim details. Both bodies bore the scars of torture, but the male victim had endured a particularly gruesome ordeal. His body was covered with repeated burns, likely inflicted with a cigarette. Zulema, however, suffered a different kind of torture. Stripped naked, she had been violated before her life was extinguished. Her body bore the chilling mark of her tormentors, 6 brutal slashes with a razor or knife, carving the letter Z onto her buttocks, breasts, and abdomen. The message wasn't subtle. The killers had also used black paint to scrawl the same menacing symbol across her face. They had robbed her of her dignity, leaving behind only the chilling signature of her killers, Los Zetas, a ruthless cartel allied with the Beltran Leyvas, locked in a deadly war with El Chapo. Zulema's final resting place was a quiet corner of the Gardens of Remembrance Cemetery. Yet, every Day of the Dead, a mysterious visitor arrives. They carefully clean the tombstone, tending to the grass and ensuring it remains a vibrant green. Fresh flowers, orange marigolds, white chrysanthemums, and red roses replace the previous year's offerings. The letters, spelling out Zulema's name, also receive a gentle dusting. The inscription on the tombstone itself offered a glimpse into the life that ended so violently. Beautiful, pretty, and friend. An iron princess who was bent but never broken. Whether this epitaph reflected reality or a desperate wish remained unknown. The truth, much like the identity of her visitor, was lost in the silence Zulema maintained, even in death. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.